Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our fifth of six town halls that Families Together is hosting this year. Over the past 3 years during the pandemic, we've been hosting these town halls, and they were such a huge success that even though we're back in person for our Family Empowerment Day next week on March 21st here in Albany, we wanted to continue with the town halls because they're so effective. It gives us the opportunity to meet with commissioners and legislators, and for them to have the opportunity to hear from you, from family members and young people with lived experience in their particular system. Today's town hall is the Developmental Disabilities Town Hall, and we're so fortunate to be joined by the Commissioner of OPWDD, which is the Office of Persons with Developmental Disabilities. Kerri Neifeld is the commissioner and has been a longtime ally, even before she was the commissioner at OPWDD. So we're really pleased not only to have her as a partner and a friend, but also to address our group today. Kerri, do you want to introduce yourself briefly? Commissioner.
Great, thank you. Hi, Paige. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Paige, for inviting me to be here. And thank you to Families Together for the invitation and for hosting these town halls. I really look forward to hearing from families and having the opportunity to have dialogue directly with families and with the people that OPWDD is supporting. And events like this are a great opportunity for me to do that. So I'm grateful to Families Together. I'm grateful to you all for being here and look forward to the discussion. I also just want to let you know that because of the snow, I'm home and I do have a wild toddler running around in the background. So I'm going to try to not let him disrupt us too much, but if you hear him or see him, I do apologize.
Thank you, Commissioner. No apologies necessary. We often joke that if ever there was an organization that you're addressing that would understand about families, it's Families Together. We encourage and ask people to bring their children into the office often just so we can see them. But it's our life, it's what our whole career revolves around. So we're very, very pleased to have you here. And for those who watch this later, this was recorded on a snow emergency day in the Albany area. And so that's why, and hopefully no one will lose power or internet while the town hall is going on. So it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator for today's town hall, Kim Kaiser, who is our Director of DEI at Families Together and also a parent with lived experience. Kim?
Thank you, Paige. Before we get started, I want to just do a brief introduction of our panelists. And I want to start with Carol.
Hi there, my name is Carol Murdy, and I am in the southern tier of New York. I am a parent of a child with on the autism spectrum disorder, and I'm a family peer advocate. And I also I worked under OPWDD for my 27 years in my full-time career. I have since left it, but I'm really happy to be able to speak to you today.
Thanks, Carol. And Kathy?
Hi, my name is Kathy Salazar. I'm a foster parent and the adoptive parent of a child on the spectrum, and also the legal guardian of his 15-year-old brother who's in an OPWDD residential placement right now, and also a member of the Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Leadership Council.
Great. And last but not least, Simcha Weinstein.
Hey, everybody. I am a veteran community rabbi and hospital chaplain turned dadvocate, currently crushing it with Kim in the DEI space at Families Together, and very happy and honored to be here this morning. Thank you. And
last but not least, I'm sorry, Simcha wasn't last. Zach Kilmer was last. Sorry, Zach, go ahead.
Hey, everyone. And thank you, Commissioner, for being here despite the snow emergency. Really appreciate it. My name is Zach Kilmer, and I am a young adult on the autism spectrum with lived experience, and I'm also the public policy coordinator here at Families Together.
Thank you, everybody. So before we begin, I just want, and Commissioner Neifeld, just know that, like Paige said, we're very embracing. This space is, every space Families Together enters in, we consider an affinity space. So just understand you're with friends, you're with allies, and without further ado, let's begin. So as Paige already said, my name is Kim Kaiser, and I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Families Together in New York State. But I'm also Director of Programming and Policy at the Color of Autism Foundation. And that's where we provide culturally congruent services to Black, Brown, Indigenous families and parents and individuals of color across the country. And one of our roles is also to look into what DD services are doing across the country. And I really appreciate how OPWDD has set forth their leadership group and their provider networks to address some of these issues that impact many different communities, particularly historically marginalized communities. But as a parent of somebody who has worked with hundreds of families and individuals from these communities, it's my passion to support their passion, their purpose, their culture, and all of their intersecting identities. Robert Hensel said, "There's no greater deficit in society than the inability to see people as more." And I know that OPWDD has strived to do this through their self-direction initiatives. However, I feel that an affirmed identity and potential is key to empowerment and hope, because nobody is just their disability. Nobody is just their diagnosis. And because our system has to continually work to aspire to incorporate every aspect of a person's identity into the work that they do, my question to you today is, and every day my question is for OPWDD, is how are you delivering person-centered, culture-centered, identity-centered interventions and supports outside of self-direction?
Much. It's such a great, thoughtful, and it's talk a lot about. We're contemplating often. I think we're taking a lot of action in this space, and with the full recognition that as an agency, as a government agency, right, we are also learning and committed to continuing to learn. And our leadership team in particular has, and honestly, throughout every level of the agency, we have real champions for this work. Focusing on, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging first. I'll say, we recently, just about 6 months ago, appointed our first full-time Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Hira Mir. And she's really incredible, full of energy, really focused on cultural and linguistic competence, bringing that to our system, bringing that to our agency. Looking at intersectionality and understanding the many ways that people's identities have created systems of oppression, right, that have impacted them, and how we as an agency, right, especially an agency like OPWDD, where really when someone comes to OPWDD, when they're found eligible, when they begin to receive services either from our agency or from one of the agencies that we support, it's a lifetime relationship, right? We are beginning a lifetime relationship where this system will hopefully be one piece of support for a person that has a developmental disability. And to your point, right, if we were only to look at that person as their developmental disability, what a disservice we would be doing to them, right, and to our ability to be a really full and rich system. So we really are pushing ourselves to understand, like I said, right, the intersection of where someone has a developmental disability, but is also transgender, or on the in the LGBTQ spectrum somewhere, where an individual has a cultural or linguistic identity that they want to embrace, right, along with being a person that has a developmental disability. So, and it's an area that we're really excited about. We've done a few things. Like I said, right, the appointment of Dr. Mir has been incredible, and she's brought a lot of energy around this space. We've entered into a partnership with Georgetown to look specifically at diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we're also adding the B there to belonging, because we think that's really important. The lived experience of having a developmental disability are ingrained in all of the work that we do. Where are their voices when we're setting policy? Where are their voices when we're investigating incidents? where are their voices when we're creating, new homes or thinking about new housing opportunities or thinking about employment training. Making sure that the people who ultimately should be benefiting from these services have a say in how we're developing that. And so those are some of the ways that we're trying really to begin to do better in this space. And it's something that we're really excited about. One thing, and I can touch on it later because I think one of the later questions will come up as well. But one thing that we're really doing also is taking a look at gender identity and sexual orientation. And for a long time, I think people have thought that people that have developmental disabilities don't have a gender identity or a sexual orientation, that somehow that's something that people with developmental disabilities don't need to concern themselves about, or we shouldn't be concerning ourselves about. And that's, quite frankly, that's silly, and it's insulting, right? So I think as an agency, we're trying to push ourselves and our providers to be, again, right, thinking about the whole person. One thing that I hear a lot when I meet with self-advocates, especially younger self-advocates, is, saying, I am trans and I want to express myself, and my family doesn't hear me when I talk about this. My provider doesn't hear me when I talk about this. My house doesn't give me the ability to express myself the way that I want to. And so we've been working on policies. We've been working on documents that we can put out that provide some guidance to the field, that will provide some training opportunities so that we can begin to push people to have these important conversations. And I know it can be difficult for families who feel like their whole lives have been about protecting their loved one that has a developmental disability. And we want to be able to provide support, to the person and to their families to be able to have what can be difficult conversations, but are really necessary if we want to live up to what we say we want to live up to, right? Which is embracing and supporting the whole person. And right, like you said it, right, not the diagnosis, not the disability, right, but the person. So I think there's a lot of work to do. We're really excited. We're really excited to partner with people with lived experience and with families on how we can continue to advance in this space. I think it's really, I think when we talk about setting a progressive agenda, right, and really kind of pushing to the next frontier of how are we supporting people with developmental disabilities and really empowering people, this is a really important space for us to be very serious about.
Thank you, Commissioner. That was a very thoughtful response. I loved it. And our next question is going to come from Zach Kilmer. Zach?
Thanks, Kim. So yeah, my name is Zach, and as I mentioned before, I am a young adult who's on the autism spectrum, and I am also on the queer identity spectrum. I faced a lot of adversity in school due to grade school and high school due to my being autistic. This was largely from uninformed and oftentimes bigoted and ableist neurotypical people. This often took the form of bullying from other students, which was almost always never adequately addressed by the school system. But it also took the form of a lack of training and understanding in staff and adults from how to work with autistic youth, like mental health professionals, teachers, administrators, etc. Training and education, as well as properly enforced and evidence-based anti-bullying initiatives, could have spared me a lot of trauma and worsening of my co-occurring mental health diagnoses. We need a cultural shift regarding the public's understanding of neurodiversity. So my question to you is, how do you see parents and young people being a part of that shift? And how are you working with agencies like Neifeld and others to address bullying in general, and in particular for neurodivergent youth?
It's a great question, and I'm sorry to hear about your experience. And I think it's incredibly powerful that you're turning that experience into advocacy, right? And how can you take what you experienced and hopefully help prevent that for other young kids as they're growing up. So just really kudos to you, and it's incredibly impressive. I think it's a really important question. Obviously I just touched a little bit on some of the work that we're doing around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, specifically around trying to include and encourage the voices of people with lived experience in our policy setting and setting our goals and priorities. And so it's important to hear feedback like this. What I would say is, in addition to that, we're doing a lot of work with the Office for Mental Health in particular, around cross training. As you know, right, the mental health of young people is a big topic that people are talking about all the time. You know, recently a study came out showing that, you know, tragically, right, suicide is the #2 reason that, you know, kids under 12 are dying, which is just really, it's tragic. I know a lot of it has to do with, you know, with bullying. A lot of that has to do with the conditions that students are growing up in, or kids are growing up in these days, the pandemic, you know, and really, I think a mental health system that, you know, needs to learn how to and address the needs of young people. And I think OMH is being really responsive to that. And we're lucky we have really great partnerships with them where we're talking about opportunities for cross training, opportunities for making sure that mental health professionals are getting the benefit from people who have professional experience in the IDD field, and vice versa, so that we in our system, right, when we're working with someone who is on the autism spectrum or neurodivergent, that we're aware of and can be in tune to some of the mental health concerns and mental health challenges that those individuals might be facing. I think flagging the partnership with NICED is a great idea. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know of any initiatives that we're undertaking with NICED related to bullying, especially for students, you know, who are neurodivergent or on the autism spectrum. But it's absolutely work that we can do, we can undertake, and we can talk to NICED about. So happy to reach out to them and see how we can support the efforts that they're undertaking already related to bullying. You know, we do provide services to young people, to students who are in schools. We operate some residential schools. And so those are areas that we can look into, but also the partnership with NICED for students who are in public school is really important. So thanks for flagging that as an idea.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zach. Our next question is coming from Kathy.
Hi, thank you for meeting with us today. My name is Kathy Salazar, and as I said earlier, I'm a foster parent and the adoptive parent of a 12-year-old boy with disabilities. He's on the autism spectrum. He has trauma-related disabilities, all kinds of things going on with him. And he was my foster son, and I adopted him from there. But I'm also the legal guardian of his 15-year-old brother, who was in foster care, and we couldn't find the right place for him. He was in 5 different foster homes. Unfortunately, he couldn't live with me and his brother because too much triggering, and he's very aggressive and destructive. So the judge decided that it was better to separate them when they first came into foster care, because the brother was too physically aggressive for the younger child, who only has one arm. So, you know, it was not the greatest situation for us. So he went to the Children's Home of Wyoming Conference for 2.5 years of his foster care. And the goal was always to reunify with his mother. But unfortunately, at some point we decided, or the court decided, that that was not going to be possible. And so the county foster, or the county social services reached out to OPWDD and found a placement for him in Rochester, which is 2.5 hours away from where we live in the southern tier of New York. So, but he couldn't stay in foster care because OPWDD services aren't available to the kids that are in foster care. I think it's because they feel like they can get that through the counties, you know, the OPWDD type services. So in order for him to get that placement, I became his legal guardian so that he could come out of foster care and go into a much more permanent placement, which was always the goal. He lives in a residential house in Rochester with 6 other people. They range in age from 18 to 27. And like I said, the boy that I'm talking about here is 15. But he may be 15 chronologically, but the reality is that he's more like a 6 or 7-year-old when it comes to decision making or his own safety. So when he's in this house, which is a godsend to our family, and we totally understand that it is, but what happens is that he's given great autonomy. In other words, he's able to make decisions and advocate for his own, place in that space and stuff like that. But the problem comes when, because he's got this, the developmental age of a child, there's nobody there that says, when he says something like a child would say, like, I'm going to go spend $25 on candy at the dollar store. There's nobody that can say no. More likely they'll say, that's not really a good idea. A lot of times they'll reach out to me and call me and say, this is what he wants to do. And I can talk him down from that. But, the reality is that he can't make those good decisions. And the staff is a fantastic staff. He's in a great, so, and mainly the reason for that, for my problem with the house, is that there's no places for a child like him, where they do have people that they can say no when it's not a good decision. He elopes from cars, and they actually had to go through this big process to be able to put the child lock on the back seat, that's common sense, so that he can't jump out of a car and run off when they're driving and stuff like that, or get ran over or something. So I actually have two questions, and so for this part, I'm wondering what OPWDD can do to maybe find or set up more appropriate facilities for children like him. It's especially that age group, the teen, or actually, I'm sure there's younger kids that are in this situation as well. As far as placements go, or setting up something that can help with that.
Sure. It sounds like you've been a godsend to these kids in your life. So thank you for what you do as a foster and adoptive parent. I started my career in social services in foster care, and have a big heart for families who do that. So it's complicated. A lot of what you raised is complicated. There are, and I don't want to, we don't have to get into the nitty-gritty details, but there are competing federal rules around the way that services are paid for. So, your point about him not being able to be in foster care and receive OPWDD services, that's not an OPWDD rule, that's a federal law. And so we have to follow those types of things because of the way that we pay for most of our services through the Medicaid program. And the same with the child lock on the door, right? Going through that process, again, is because the federal government, when you lock someone into a situation, whether it be a vehicle or a bedroom or a home, even if it's for a safety reason, it's seen as a restriction of a person's rights. And so in order to be able to do that for safety reasons, there is a process that we must follow to document why we're restricting their rights. It's not to say that it can't happen. It's just we have to follow those processes very clearly. And that's an outcropping of the civil rights movement, right? And coming from an institutionalized setting or system where people with developmental disabilities weren't afforded their civil rights. So it's there for a reason. It's there for protection. It can sometimes feel like bureaucratic and difficult to work around, but I think it's helpful to understand, right, the rationale, because at one point, right, not too long ago, 50 years ago, right, we were taking kids and locking them in hospitals and treating them poorly. So not we OPWDD, we as society. So just, a little bit of background in case it's helpful for understanding that. And OPWDD, typically we're not the primary provider of services for children, for school-age children. And we do everything that we can. Like I said, we have services that are for children, that are for families. We do everything that we can to preserve and support families and people with developmental disabilities to be able to remain in their families at home. We recognize, obviously, that can't always happen. And so really the resolution to those situations is typically a residential school program. So that's usually it's usually a school that has residential facilities on the same property where the student can get their education. They're entitled, especially a child that has a disability is entitled to education up until the age of 21. We want to preserve that entitlement. And so we really work very closely with OCFS, with the state education department, and with our providers across the state to ensure that residential school opportunities are available for students who can't remain at home. And so that's really the primary place where we would go. And those opportunities are available across the state. There are rare circumstances like the one where you're describing, where we have group homes, that have evolved to serve children, but we don't actually have a special designation or a special certification for a children's group home. That's really not part of our long-term plan. Like I said, our long-term plan is to continue to really create and support services that can preserve, families being together. When that can't happen, we have the residential school system that we rely on to help ensure that students can get that education that they're entitled to, and have a safe place to live. So that's sort of, and if there's specifics of your child's situation that you want to talk through, happy, to make sure that there's a connection to our offices, so that you can have that conversation. But really that's sort of from the policy perspective or from the bigger picture, that's the direction that we're trying to push.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask about something else, but you've actually answered that as well.
That's
So,
great.
yes.
Nice, robust question.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy, and thanks again, Commissioner, for that great response. And next we have Carol Murdy. Carol?
Hi, Commissioner. Thanks again for being here. As I said earlier, I've worked under the OPWDD umbrella for about 27 years in various capacities with 2 different local agencies. However, no amount of experience would have prepared me for the undertaking of dealing with my daughter's school district when she started kindergarten. My daughter came to me as an infant under foster care, and I adopted her when she was 3. I'm going to try to make this as concise as possible, but basically we did everything proactively when we started realizing that my daughter was having some challenges. So by the time she got to pre-K, she was in a 12-1-1 program. She was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and her challenges lie mostly in issues with anxiety related to the autism. It's very prevalent with her, and it's also not really unusual with people with anxiety either, as I'm sure you know. So when it came time to transfer from pre-K to kindergarten, of course, we had the CPSC meetings and I can't remember what it's called, the transfer meeting. Anyway, we really were not in support of my daughter going into a mainstream classroom. It just, historically, there was no reason to believe that she would be successful in a room with 22 other children with no support. And we had, documentation and years of work that we had done proactively to make sure when she did get to kindergarten, she would have the support she needed. The school district did not feel that she needed those supports, so she went in cold. And within a month, she was suffered her first suspension from school. And with several undocumented suspensions prior. So like her first month of school was basically non-existent and eventually could become completely non-existent. We got to the point where basically the school didn't care where my daughter went as long as it wasn't there. She was displaced 5 times, ultimately ending up in a trauma-based educational day program. They called it a school. I would have to disagree with that. It was trauma-based. My daughter does not have a trauma history. She didn't until she left there. After maybe about 8 weeks, we finally pulled her out of there. We really were left with no options of where to educate my daughter. She's smart. She has no cognitive disability. She has a typical IQ. As a matter of fact, I can say now she's in a 611 program in 1st grade in another school district, but and happily I can say that And the teacher contacted me the other day and said she was helping the second grader with her now. So despite everything that happened in kindergarten and the lack thereof kindergarten, she has been resilient through that. I guess coming from an OPWD background, I really get scared when I think about her future because, you know, we had all of these suggestions given to us about her going to BOCES and going here and there. It's not an appropriate, it wasn't an appropriate place for her. And the school has nothing, our school district has nothing in place to support kids with social emotional issues. And they're only too happy to send them anywhere, as long as they're not there. And her, you know, if we did not agree to that, and we're not ever going to agree to BOCES because they don't get the same education in BOCES as they do in your mainstream school, and she deserves the same education. She's smart. Why shouldn't she graduate from high school like everyone else and go on to college or whatever she wants to do? So with all that being said, I guess my question is, I'd like to ask your thoughts regarding the exclusionary and punitive practices that are taking place in our schools, based off NICET's current recommendations. And I didn't get to that, but not only did my daughter suffer multiple suspensions, and she also dealt with a lot of restrictive techniques and being secluded. And you know, when first grade rolled around, she was only allowed to go down to her home school district for an hour. And I have a picture, and it's forever emblazoned in my mind, of my daughter. They wouldn't allow her in school until the teacher came to get her. So she had to sit in the locked vestibule. And she would sit there looking, peering in the window on her knees, just hoping to wave to another child that she would see hopping along down the hallway. My daughter is very social, so she really missed that piece. And I can say now that she is in a 611 program in another district, but that's only for another year. And then when she's ready to go into third grade, we're going to start this whole cycle all over again. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And again, I think you heard me in the last comment, right? But I have a really big heart for, you know, families who have gone into foster care system and adopt. And I think it's really amazing that you guys have each other. And, you know, sorry for the circumstances that you faced. It sounds like it's been challenging for you and challenging for her. And I'm always marveling at our families who just, you know, become the strongest advocates and experts, right, in all these different systems because they have to be. You know, so thank you for that. You know, I think a lot of this is, you know, a lot of the questions here really are probably better directed at SED and trying to understand that. And I'm not trying to, not answer the question, but really the school system is regulated by SED. You know, we work in partnership, you know, to transition students as they're leaving their public education to OPWDD, but you know, we really, you know, we don't get involved in the regulation, sort of in the understanding. If there are connections that we can help make, I'm happy to do that. But what I can say is that you heard me say in, you know, the last response to the questions that we're really focused on, you know, being able to provide the types of services that children and families need to help them, you know, live and maintain within their communities, within their families. You know, some of the areas that we're really focused on are providing, you know, home-based crisis intervention for students. So for young people. So if there are areas, you know, where a student is struggling at home, or where, right, the example that you used with your daughters, right, when she's feeling anxious, you know, she acts out aggressively as a form of coping with her anxiety. You know, we're looking to bring more and more services to families to help the person and the family, you know, create a coping environment, create coping mechanisms that person can employ throughout their life. So there are definitely areas where we're working to better support children with developmental disabilities, better support their families, looking to really kind of create that crisis continuum to hopefully help in all areas of their life, maintain. I think, what we see happen frequently is one or the other, there's a challenge, right? A student will be challenged in school, they'll have behaviors in school, they'll act out, and then, you'll see what happened, right, with your family where that, we need to look for a new school placement. And the school, they become frustrated and they can't support the student the way they need to. Or what happens is a student will do fine in school, but the family can't support them. And so we're trying to make sure that we're working in partnership with SED to ensure that we're supporting the family, we're supporting the individuals during the off hours, and that SED is supporting the student during the school hours. I know it can be challenging, and sort of each school district is its own little entity, right? And has some school districts I know are known across the state for having really incredible programs for students with disabilities, and others, struggle a little bit. So, if there's ways that we can support, happy to do that, but we're definitely focusing on ways that we can continue to bring, services and coping mechanisms and strategies to families and young people with developmental disabilities.
Thank you. And thank you, Carol. Last, we say Simca for last. So Simca, your question?
Thank you, Kim. And my question parlays nicely into the last question. So I want to begin, Commissioner, by saying as a rabbi, I know there's no office hours for leaders, and I want to acknowledge the Herculean strides that you have made in the 5-year plan. OPWDD is a behemoth boat that you are steering in the right direction, even in a blizzard. So no power, no internet, no problem. I thank you deeply. I feel like you're waiting for a but, Commissioner. It's coming, it's here. But although my therapist said no but, just and. So when a crisis landed our then 14-year-old autistic son in a pediatric psychiatric ward, leaving him there felt counter to our natural parental instincts. Even though the staff were loving and understanding, none were trained in issues specific to autism. I hope you're still with us, Commissioner. We'll keep going. It was at that moment for me a real come to Jesus moment, and there's not many rabbis that have a come to Jesus moment when I began to notice just how many other autistic youths had been admitted after suffering similar meltdowns. It constituted a surprisingly significant portion of the inpatient population. You're with me, Commissioner?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, thank you so much. So my question is that how can OPWDD better serve the intersectional cross-system needs of dual diagnosed neurodivergent population?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a great question. And it's absolutely an area that we're focused on. And again, right, I already referenced our partnership with OMH, but we do have a very strong partnership with OMH, and we're recognizing and working toward, again, true cross-training, making sure that our professionals are trained in mental health and vice versa. I think it's an area that we do a lot of work, and we're recognizing, the opportunities to do more. I think specifically as it relates to individuals on the autism spectrum or neurodivergent individuals, and some of the challenges that present for them with mental illness or behavioral challenges. Those are frequently the folks that we see entering into psychiatric centers, entering into hospitals because of behavioral challenges, and then getting stuck, which is, diagnosis opportunities. Again, like I said, creating those opportunities for cross-training and making sure we're filling in the gaps in our system. We're doing a lot. OMH is also the beneficiary of large investment in the governor's proposed budget this year. And we've already had meetings, and we'll be meeting later on this afternoon even to talk about how we can, make sure that some of those resources are going to individuals with dual diagnosis. So whether that's the creation of additional specialized inpatient units for people with dual diagnosis, creation of special teams that can help support people who are in crisis, transitional housing opportunities, things like that are areas that we're really focused on. Our own budget this year, appropriates a $12 million in capital that we'll be spending over the course of the next 2 years to create additional intensive treatment opportunities within the OPWDD system. So looking to create those in the Rochester area where we have the benefit of strong staffing patterns. And those would be short-term treatment-oriented opportunities for people who are experiencing crisis, for individuals who are potentially being served in hospital, emergency departments, or psychiatric centers that need, like I said, a short-term treatment-oriented opportunity to help stabilize and then continue, right, to live in the community after that. So that's one area that we're focused. We're partnered with OMH and SUNY Upstate Medical Center, where they're creating an inpatient psychiatric unit that's will be tailored specifically for children ages 5 to 21 who are duly diagnosed with mental illness and on the autism spectrum. We're also looking to create a step down opportunity from that program so that the individuals who are being served there and their families have the opportunity to continue to engage in the right treatment opportunities so that when a child goes home, it can be a successful reunification with the family, and the family can also learn the skills to best support that their loved one when they return home. So that's just a couple of the things that we're working on. We're working very closely, again, like I said, with OMH and OASIS, and meeting with our local mental health leaders at every county. We actually were supposed to be meeting tomorrow. The snowstorm has canceled that meeting, but meeting with our local government partners too to understand the gaps in the counties across the state in services, and how we can continue to support our partners in local government as they deliver some of these services across the state.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now, I thought running a synagogue was difficult, but to be person-centered when you're at the crossroads of multiple systems is near mission impossible. And I'm starting to feel more and more, not everything should fall on OPWDD. And sometimes I feel like it does. I'm glad conversations are going. They do need urgency, but I am grateful that you are listening. So thank you so much, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks
And
for the question.
Yeah, they are. And Commissioner Neifeld, you've been just so gracious and the answers. I have to tell you, these are these out of all the town halls that Families Together has done with OPWDD, even before I started working for Families Together, this has been the one where I feel like answers have been received, and I like I said, your 5-year plan is awesome, just like Simka said. But for now, I want to pass it back over to Paige Pierce for our closing.
Thank you. And Commissioner, did you have anything else that you wanted to say to our group?
No, just thank you, obviously, for all the work that you do as Families Together, and obviously as families supporting your loved ones. Thank you. And please know that, we are here as your partners as you continue to do that work to support your loved ones.
Thank you. And we really, we do want you to view us as a resource, not only as family members, but also young people. We have a whole section of Families Together that is youth power, and young people with disabilities of any cross systems needs are very involved and self-empowered and organized. And Zach is a part of that. So we really encourage you to view us as a resource on anything. Our philosophy is nothing about us without us. And we are here and stand ready to advise whenever, whether asked or not. Sometimes whenever asked for sure, but also even unsolicited sometimes. But thank you so much. And I neglected to say at the beginning that the chairs of the Developmental Disabilities committees in both the Senate and the Assembly were unable to join today, but we really appreciate your time, Commissioner, and your dedication. As Simka said, this is a Herculean thing. We understand the ship that you're writing, and it's not an easy task, and we are here to support and help in any way we can. So we have one more town hall on Friday with the education department and with chairs from the education committee in the Senate and Assembly. And we also have next Tuesday on the 21st, no snowstorms, just other lobbying efforts, but we're going to be in the well of the Legislative Office Building on State Street in Albany in the morning, starting at around like 10. The program will start at around 11, and we will have box lunches and meetings with legislators and a rally outside on the steps, weather permitting. So we look forward to everybody who's watching to please join us this Friday for the last of the town halls, and then next Tuesday for the Family Empowerment Day in person for the first time since 2020. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Stay safe, everybody, and dry.
Yeah. Yes.